Are officially live. Thank you everybody for the bit of delay that we had getting on here, working out some technology issues. So thank you everybody for joining us today. Today I'm joined with two fabulous trainers, Erin and Becca. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
So today we're going to be talking about something super cool, which actually will give you guys a little bit of insight into actually the presentations that both Becca and Erin will be doing at Puppy Summit. And it's really important stuff. So today we're talking about communication, communicating with our puppies, communicating with our dogs, and why it's so important, because the way we say things, how we say things, it really does matter. And oftentimes I think people kind of assume that our puppies maybe know more than they really do. And that can be a problem when we're trying to live a peaceful and happy life with them. So before we get started, Erin, why don't you start us off? Do you want to give everybody a little bit of an intro as to who you are and what you're doing in the dog world right now?
Hey, yeah, so I'm Erin. I own and operate Down to Earth Doglady, and I have my own training business out here in Chester County, Pennsylvania. And I have been a part of the team, I think a couple months into it, but you mostly have seen me working with deaf and blind dogs and focusing on working with dogs with disabilities. And that's going to be what my presentation, at least my one presentation, solely focuses on, and also continuing cooperative care, all of those things with our disabled dogs. So that's pretty much what I'm
Excellent.
focusing on right now.
Yeah, and it's good stuff. I know I had you on not too long ago, and we did
Yeah.
a nice conversation about our blind and deaf puppies, and there's not quite enough resources for them. So I'm glad you're giving people a little bit more on that topic, as well as enrichment. Everybody knows I'm a huge fan of
Yeah.
enrichment.
Yeah, I
And
think we all are. Yeah.
yeah, it's so important.
It is.
And Becca, why don't you give us a brief introduction about you and what you're doing in the dog world?
I am Becca Hintz. I own Wintergrity Canine. I'm out here in California, Northern California, Solano County. I work a lot with behavior cases, and which is, of course, driven my interest in puppies, because if we can start them correctly and communicate effectively, we can prevent the behavior cases. So I have a huge passion for teaching people how to communicate effectively with their dogs. And I call myself a relationship-focused trainer. I think we were created to have joyous relationships with our dogs. And so that's what I really try to create with my clients.
I love that. You know, it's true too, because we see a bunch of behavior cases here as well. And a lot of those problems, not all of them, but a lot of them can really be prevented if we get in there early and do that important work. And I think when we get new puppies, we think, gosh, I want this new puppy to grow up to be this awesome, canine companion for me, to do all the things. And so people jump into teaching all of these tricks and kind of, we'll call them obedience behaviors. Um, but that can sometimes backfall if we're missing those important developmental stages in our puppies.
Definitely. Couldn't agree more.
So let's first talk about kind of how dogs communicate. So obviously there's a lot of things that dogs will do with their body and their body language that let us know kind of how they're feeling, if they're happy, if they're stressed out. When we are raising puppies in particular, we want to look at that body language in order to kind of gauge how they're feeling emotionally about a certain situation. Because when we're working on socialization, our goal is to make those positive associations, right? So if they're worried about something, we might not be building that positive association that we think we are. So when we are going out and socializing our puppies, or even socializing our puppies in the home, what kind of things from their body language are we looking for?
I'm a huge fan of loose body language and really reading the whole dog. And I really like to teach people that we look to hear what our dog is saying. And it's really different from human communication, where we just listen, right? We hear so often, listen, listen, listen. But with dogs, it's look to hear what they're saying. And so we have to look at the whole dog. And there's so much miscommunication about dogs. I hear so often, well, the tail was wagging.
Yeah.
The tail tells us so many different stories.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about happy. And so I really teach people, look at the whole dog. But if I could teach one thing, is your dog loose and wiggly and happy? Is the body dancing and wiggling and happy? Because if you have that, we have a comfortable dog. And if you don't, if you're just going to break it down to super simple, then you may not have a comfortable dog. And that's when you have to start thinking about, how do I fix this? What can I do to get back to this?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. I hear that often as well, well, the tail was wagging. Okay, great, but what was the rest of the body doing? Because tail motion is not always a happy thing. It can mean all kinds of things. So we really got to look at that whole picture when we're looking at our dogs to really kind of, as you said, listen to what they're saying and see how they're feeling. Erin, do you find that those body language signals change at all when we start looking at our puppies who might have impairments?
Actually, you have to notice them more. I can It's been, very interesting to watch my dog Darla because I always say she talks through her tail. So even if her tail is slightly tucked, I know we have a bigger issue than just a slightly tucked tail. There's a lot of internal feels going on. Now, it's interesting when you have a deaf and blind healer or you have a dog that doesn't have a tail.
Mhm.
I have noticed, and Becca, please intervene if you feel it's different. I watch the eyes a lot. So
Mhm.
if I've got these heavy eyes or I've got even just a slight scowl to the brow, it's finding those really minute body signals because you can tell they're trying to calculate everything that's going on as well. Another thing with at least blind dogs is that they'll do the whoop and just right up to gather the information around them. And while they're doing that, you have to then watch what are the shoulders doing? What are the hips doing? What's everything else doing? Is it tensing up? Is it loosening up? And so it's all along the same lines. If anything, in my presentation, I talk about how much you have to observe your deaf and
Mhm.
blind dog because they're trying to talk to you. They just don't know how very much.
Well, and isn't that the case with all puppies? I
Yeah.
think that when we bring puppies into the home, I think again, if we come into it more with a mindset of gauging how they're feeling, we can create a lot more confidence and better quote behavior from our dogs. I think people too quickly try to jump into skills. I really like to focus on, more life skills with our puppies. Is the puppy easy to live with? Is the puppy happy with the world around them? And a lot of puppies are really happy. But I also see a lot of puppies that are really quite worried right from the start. And I don't want
Mhm.
to focus on behaviors with those dogs in the sense of sit and stay and go to place. I
Yeah.
want to get that puppy enjoying life and loosening up and learning how cool novel things are
Yes.
because we can really prevent quite a bit of problems like Becca, you said. So when we're starting to look at what our puppies can grow into, if we miss those key moments when they're young, what are some of the kind of those behavioral challenges that can develop later on when they don't get those key confidence boosting periods early on in life?
Fear and anxiety. And it's interesting how many phone calls I get where I hear about aggression. And people often think of as aggression as something that the dog is doing with intent to harm. And I
Mhm.
hear about dogs, this dog wants to bite people, it wants to attack other dogs, it wants to do, it wants to do, it wants to do, it wants to do. When the truth is the dog is fearful
Mhm,
and it's anxious, and what it's really trying to do is just keep the world away.
mhm.
And how does the dog do that? How can a dog say, back up, this is my bubble, and stay out of it? Well, they can do it by barking, by lunging, growling, appearing bigger, ah.
Mhm.
That's where the hair on the back raises, right? And so those are the basic behaviors that dogs do. And one of the things I tell people often is confident dogs don't really bite.
Yeah.
It's the fearful dogs. And so
Mhm.
if there's anything I can do with a puppy, it's letting them explore the world and build confidence. Because I can take an overexcited, happy-go-lucky dog that has no manners and
Yeah.
turn it into the just best pet. But that fearful puppy that knows sit and down and can heel on a leash next to me, but is
Mhm.
scared of the world, we're going to be really good friends because we're going to work together a long time, because
Yeah.
that's a big project. How about your experience, Erin?
Yeah, all of the above. And if anything, something I notice a little bit with people who adopt a dog with a disability, let's say, let's say partially deaf and fully blind, or partially blind and fully deaf, is they tend to have this wonderful bleeding heart for this dog, right? They feel kind of sad for it and sorry for it. And so if anything, I noticed that yes, they get the basic kind of training in, but once that teenagehood hits and once those, that second fear period really comes in, I see a lot of not it's almost like, well, we did the puppy class, we why does this have to keep going on? And I noticed more so in teenagehood, this is when we're really seeing the fearful body language from our disabled dogs, because you can tell what has happened from birth to now is that their working senses are now, I joke that they have like echolocation, that it's like supersonic hearing and this supersonic smell, because their brain has literally taught themselves to use those working senses over time. And so now it seems like we've got, if we're not paying attention to these things, or we say we had a confident puppy, I do see that I will see fear and anxiety in teenagers now, because now their senses are so in tune that now they're like open, almost looking for something. That's hypothetically saying, but almost searching for something to hear, to see, to smell, and then they're not sure if they're afraid of it or not. So all along those lines, but I do see a lot of, well, let's just let them do, they're already deaf and blind. Let's let them just be a dog, and
Mhm.
sometimes it's even worse. So
Yeah. Well, I think that it's hard to, when we've got a variety of puppy emotions on the scale, we can have everything from really timid, I don't want to go outside, all the way
yeah,
to that confident bulldozer puppy that's like, look out, world, here I come, And with
definitely.
with that big spectrum, I think it can be hard for people sometimes to pick up on those small signals, because sometimes those
Yeah.
body language things are not super obvious to our pet people. We know the big ones, like showing our teeth or the hackles raised up on the back, and we know the big tucked tail. But maybe we're not looking for that spectrum of signals. We're not looking for the head turn away, or the little lip lick, or the tail that drops just below neutral. It's not
Yeah,
completely tucked, right? But it's dropping.
yeah,
And that gives us, if we can learn how to read their body language, it gives us so much power in how we train them, because then we know we've got like a lens into their emotions. We know how they're feeling about something. And again, kind of going back to what I was saying about teaching manners, we've got to make sure that the learner is emotionally filled before we can really start engaging that learner and teaching those behaviors. And I think that's where not only us being able to read our dogs, but then figuring out how we as people communicate with dogs,
yeah,
right? I find a lot of my clients, maybe we'll use too many words or use words that the dog doesn't know yet,
mhm,
and so, or we get frustrated and that emotion comes out in our
yeah,
voice and our words. And then, gosh, have we made our learner more worried unintentionally? So it's that balance of, both being able to read how our dog is communicating, and then gauge and change how we're communicating back with our dog.
yeah. And just to go off of that just a little bit, it's interesting because when we talk to our if say we're using tactile um, touch cues with our deaf and blind dogs, that if you're frustrated, your tap or your swipe is going to come off harder. And
Mhm.
in that moment, I've seen dogs be like, "Oh, well, should I be more nervous now because now you're literally talking to me harder?" And
Mhm.
I can almost see it tighten up. And the way that you tap or the way that you swipe or the way that you talk to these disabled dogs also matters, because they'll pick up on that tone
Mhm.
through touch. And I find it fascinating, obviously, but you have to really make sure, I've found with my clients, that slow down, really make sure you're being like a swipe if you want something, making sure that the touch matches really what you're looking for there.
I find with language, it's really interesting. we're very spoken creatures, right? We expect dogs to match that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're
Yeah.
not. And I equate that. I've lived in Europe and traveled in a lot of countries. Obviously, I did not learn that many languages. And so when you go to a different country and you've taken the time to learn a few key words like where is the bathroom?
Uh-huh.
And so you ask somebody, bathroom. Not, excuse me, where's the bathroom, please? Because that's
Yeah.
far too many words to learn in 12 different languages.
Yeah.
And I showed dogs in Europe. And so I would go and say, bathroom, please, because I always, those are two of my words, always. And they would say, oh, the bathroom is in this place over here, to the right, left, whatever. And I would listen so intently for the word that meant bathroom, but they spoke so fast with their accent. And I could not so many times pull the bathroom out of that whole whatever they said. And I always think, gosh, that's what our poor dogs must be doing. Because here we are talking to them, and it's like, hey, Fido, how are you? You're doing really good. I wanted you to sit, but you didn't do it. Now, why didn't you do that? I told you to sit, and you still haven't done it. My gosh, what's wrong with you? You're not listening to me. See, he doesn't listen to me. My dog's not very smart, is he? Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Poor dogs.
Yeah.
I love that analogy. I think it is.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
really
it
good.
really, it is, because it gives you as a human a lens into what the dog is experiencing. And it can be, I totally get it. It can be really hard to change our own behavior. Behavior change is hard. And
For
for
all of us.
people that talk
Yeah.
a lot or talk loud or use their hands, learning how to reduce that hand motion, to speak with intention, to say fewer words, to control, how those words are coming out, that can be tough.
Yes.
But when our learner is a different species and basically a foreign exchange student,
Yep.
it becomes more important when we're looking at success with that team.
And
Mm,
how
that,
powerful, oh, I'm sorry, Becca, I was just going to
go
say, and
ahead.
how powerful when we do create that language and we do
Exactly.
have that line of communication. It's like, I know when we get some of these puppies in, no one's ever tried to talk to them, and whether they're deaf, blind, or hearing, most of the time rescue dogs are, they no one's ever tried to properly build that line of communication. And when it's like when you watch them figure it out, it's just so rewarding, and it should be rewarding to the handler, the guardian, the owner, it should be rewarding to them too.
Absolutely. One of my favorite things with clients is I'll go in and I'll work with the dog. And when I go back, the dog just comes up and is like, oh my gosh, you're here. And they'll say, I think our dog likes you better than us. No,
Yeah.
that's totally not it.
Yeah.
We communicate clearly. And again, when you're in a foreign country and you don't speak the language and you run into somebody who speaks your language, you're like, hey, how are you? Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. You would never talk to that person if they were in your city because you
Yeah.
have nothing in common. But just that ability to communicate, and you haven't been able to talk to anybody for the last week because nobody spoke your language, you're like, yes!
Yep.
And that's
Yeah.
how the dogs feel when the trainer shows up. And
Yeah.
so we teach you that. And it allows you to have such a deeper relationship with your dog. And again, the goal is always to increase the joy in your relationship. That's why we're all here, is for
Yeah.
that incredible relationship with your dog. I mean, it's just, it keeps you going every single day.
Yeah.
It does.
So let's talk about some of those cues or those communication tools that we have. I know we've talked about it a little bit. There are obviously, depending on the dog in front of us, a variety of ways that we can communicate what we want to our dogs. We call them cues, right? And it's a signal from us, whether it is a sound, whether it is a touch, whether it's a specific word, a presentation of something. There can be a variety of different ways, but what we try to do is pick something very specific, and we pair that cue with a behavior followed by reinforcement. So our dogs aren't necessarily learning English the way we learned English, but they're making that association between whatever this thing is that I did or presented or they heard or they saw. is a cue to them to do something, right? So we want to look at specifically our cues, what it is, and define it, and then look at the behavior that we want and define it. And then that gives us the ability to say, is this rewardable? Is this what I'm looking for? But obviously our cues can vary. So when you guys are working with clients, how do you pick cues? How do you help your clients pick cues for the dogs and help them really figure out how to communicate best with their dogs?
Want to go first, Becca?
Sure. A lot of it depends on the client. I work with a lot of people from different walks of life, and some of them are disabled, so they have different abilities, and we look at things that work in their environment. But a lot of times I get called in when there's challenges. So if I'm working with challenges, we are looking at things that, how can we use what's already happening and turn it into a cue?
Yeah.
And so if the doorbell currently means run and bark and leap and scratch and do crazy behavior because that's what happens when the doorbell rings, that's an environmental cue. The doorbell rings, the dogs go crazy. So we're going to try to replace that behavior. And most of my clients, when we talk, so when I first start with them, they're all like, well, we don't want the barking. Why'd you get the dog?
Yeah.
To tell us when someone's at the door.
I'm confused.
Yeah.
So what you're really saying, let's make sure I understand this. You don't want so much barking. You want an off switch.
Yeah.
Oh, well then,
Yeah.
Where do you want the dog? And you have to flesh this stuff out. It's really funny how we say one thing, but it's not what we mean. So we flesh it out. So what you really want is an off switch. So you want to be able to tell the dog, I heard you.
Yeah.
And where do you want the dog when they're barking? Are you okay with it at the door so it tells whoever's at the door that you've got a dog in the house? Or would you prefer the dog go someplace else? And we get all that ironed out for that particular client because everything's specific to the client. And then we teach the dog that the doorbell means typically go to the door, ruff, ruff, ruff. I like 3 barks, and most of my clients are happy with that. And then thank you. I love to say thank you to dogs. I'm sorry, but hush, shut up, quiet, stop it, gosh darn you.
Yeah.
They're part of our families. Can we talk nice to our dogs, please?
Yeah.
So I like thank
Yes.
you. My husband laughs because I say thank you to Alexa. So thank you.
I love that.
I'm so far from normal, y'all.
So I love it so much. Sometimes I can be very rude to her. I need to take notes to them on that.
He turned her off so she doesn't say you're welcome anymore.
That's so funny.
I love my husband. And then your dog stops. And then you can send your dog to their bed so that you can open the door and take the package. Your dog is still right there. If it's a not so nice person, they can see you have a dog and they can go away. If it's Aunt Sally who loves your dog, she can come in and the dog can come over and greet her appropriately. But we've turned the environmental cue, the doorbell, into something that now is a good thing.
Yeah.
And the dog can get rewarded for appropriate behavior with the bell. And so I love environmental cues. All the doors in my house are an environmental cue. If my hand touches the door, my dogs all know sit, and I get to go outside, which is a huge reinforcer because my dogs like to go outside and play. Everything in my client's house that they do on a daily basis, we try to turn into a cue for successful, happy, joyful living together behavior. If I'm going to sit on the couch, my butt hitting the couch is a cue to either sit next to me or at my feet to get reinforced. And I often get asked, well, what does that look like? I don't know, ask the dog. It's not my choice.
Yeah.
My husband, God bless his sweet soul, does not bring me flowers. Don't like them.
Yeah.
Doesn't buy me a lot of jewelry. I don't like it. I've got the most amazing wood stove in the world because he knows who I am. I own a popcorn popper because the man knows who I am. We're married because he knows who I am. Know who your dog is. Tracker lays at my feet or on the couch next to me because the boy loves a couch, and he gets rubbed because that dog likes to be pet. Justice eats. He doesn't need to lay next to me. He wants to lay anywhere and just he's my dog. Throw popcorn at him. There is always popcorn in this house. Just throw popcorn. Justice is happy if you're throwing food at him. And make everything in your house environmental cue, and life is easy.
I mean, isn't that a beautiful thing too about the relationship and about the communication, is that there are so many things in our dog's world that they pick up on, and so many things that they want that don't involve food and don't involve us. You know, so I was talking to group admins the other day. We were talking about toys as reinforcers, you know, and we often, when we think about training, we mostly think about food. And in our puppy group and in a lot of our training, we use a lot of food because it's really, really effective as a reward. But there are so many other things that if we just observe our dog, they'll communicate with us. They'll tell us what they want.
Yeah.
And then we can use that to boost more desired behaviors. And we can look ahead of those undesired behaviors and think, what's the precursor? What's happening here? What is causing this undesired behavior? Well, you know what? I'm going to use the reward they want. I'm going to use the signal that they're getting from that environment. And we're just going to change the behavior that's happening in between.
Yeah. I actually had a discussion recently. There's a dog that one of the rescues I volunteer for, and he's deaf and blind, and he has a reaction whenever a male enters the room. He just gets so protective of that male. He will try and fight the dogs around him. He just wants the human's attention so bad. And so my brain is like, okay, so he's being fostered by just a woman right now without any men around. And so my brain is like, how do you tackle that without actually flooding the situation with having a human, right? So in the queer community, there's a lot of people that are on hormone therapy. And I've always wondered, do you try to get access to like literally a sample of testosterone, and do you use that as a cue to do something else? So it's like, even if it's not environmental, getting creative with what the cue can be, and really, like, as our job, it's real, you have to think like, what can I use if I don't want to get a human in trouble, put a human in a scary situation, or put other dogs in a scary situation? How can I manipulate? And so it's, a cue can really be anything if you really think about it hard enough to try and I don't want to say manipulate, because but you know what I mean, to try and mold the training to your benefit.
Right.
Yeah. I think the other thing too, when we talk about communication, obviously we want very clear communication. We want it to be consistent. Sometimes that takes some human mechanics and some human training. And we need it to be that way in order for it to be effective, so that the dog knows this happens, it sounds like this, it looks like this, and every single time. And it means this. And I think that sometimes people don't allow that communication process to happen for long enough. And then we can quickly jump to conclusions or make assumptions about our dog. The dog isn't smart. The dog is dumb. The dog is not food motivated. The dog is not toy motivated. My dog doesn't like me. I think internet in general and social media has made that even worse. Falling along the trends of, oh, my dog is broken and my dog's untrainable, and people will kind of laugh and think it's funny. But I think that while we have to be mindful about our word choice and not letting our emotions control how a cue or communication signal comes out of our mouth, I think we also have to be mindful about how we're thinking about our dog's behavior. Because I think that our word choice and our descriptors are really powerful, and the wrong ones can be really damaging to that relationship that we have with our dog. And then that would further, kind of derail our ability to communicate clearly with our dogs.
And I think also that, and I'm so sorry there, Becca, I was just going to say, I also think um, as a trainer with a client, you also want to pick up on language that they say that, I have this thing I tell every client in all my lessons. I'm like, if you want to teach your dog to sit by using the word watermelon, I would support you. I'm here to just make sure you implement it
Yeah.
in the right way. So it's also like you going off of the social media thing that you just said, it's important as a puppy owner, think of your like what feels natural to say. If let's go is a natural cue for you to ask your dog to move forward, then just make sure you're implementing it correctly. But you don't have to do what all these other people are saying, of
Mhm.
heel or whatever you want to say. I always say you be creative. This is a special language that you're creating. And for instance, with my two dogs at home, they have different cues. I have different communication lines with them, and I don't mind that. I think it's a
Mhm.
special bond between both of us, or I guess all three of us.
I think the most diverse cue I get amongst all my clients is whatever we use for go to bed or go to your crate. I mean,
Yeah.
talk about a behavior that has 400 names, but it's really natural because that's how people are with their kids and their family. Hey
Yeah.
babe, it's time to go to bed. Let's hit the sack. It's night time. Who's ready for sleepy time? I mean, don't let the bed bugs. I have clients that use every single cue in the world, and I'll go to their house and I'm like, hey, how do you want to tell him to go to bed or go to his kennel? Or, eventually if he's not going to have a kennel because you guys want to get to just a bed on the ground, what do you want to use? And they're like, well, what do we have to use?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't work that way. See, this is
Yeah.
your dog in your home, and it gets to be whatever you want. I'm not here to like impose these crazy obedience rules. You're not doing competition obedience, or if you are, we'll use those words for that if you want to.
Yeah.
This is your house.
Mhm.
What do you want to call it? And I always laugh because it's always, some big burly guy that says, well, can we say sleepy poo time? And it's like, heck
I
yeah,
love
we
that.
can.
Yes.
And we teach the behavior and we put some cutesy name on it. And then I'll get some, sweet girl that looks adorable. And she's like, I want it to be great.
Ah!
Okay. And that of all the behaviors, I have had to learn more cues for go to bed.
You walk into a home, you're like, remind me what your cue is.
Yeah.
I write them down.
I have to
Yeah.
do that.
They
Yeah.
are in my case notes because I would never ever remember them. There's
Yeah.
no way. But I mean, it's so individual, and I love it because that's part of the relationship.
Mhm.
The way we talk to each other affects our emotions with each other
Mhm.
intensely. And I talk about that in my talk. We talk about labels that we use and the emotions behind the things we say and how that affects our training and our relationship with our dogs. It's really important. And we talk about, tone of voice a little bit because the way we talk to our dogs, everybody thinks it affects their dog.
Yeah.
It affects you.
Mhm.
It affects your family. And I always give the example, because I'll walk into somebody's house and we're all doing our best. That's all we ever do. And even when you're doing your worst, it's the best you have in that moment. That's just
Right.
the truth of life. At my worst, I'm giving what I've got in the moment. It's not always good enough. That's the truth, but it's what I've got. And I always tell people, I don't care what happened yesterday. I'm giving you knowledge today, and we're going to go forward from here.
Mhm.
Yep.
And that's all that matters.
Yeah.
But I'll walk in somebody's house and the dog jumps on me or whatever the dog does. I don't care. And I tell them, just let the dog be. It's okay. And somebody will just be like, off, down, cut it out. And okay, let's talk about how you want to live your life.
Mhm.
Because here's what I picture as being a great life for you and your family. You're sitting at the dinner table and the conversation goes something like this. Oh my gosh, did you guys really do that last year? That's incredible. Go to bed. Aunt Sally really came out and visited. I love it. And I like that way better than, oh my gosh, did you guys really do that last year? Go to bed. Aunt Sally came out. So you guys tell me, because this is your home and I have a lot of respect for you. You've taken the time to call in a trainer. which version do you want me to help you guys learn?
Mhm.
Because whichever one they learn is going to affect their entire family. It's going to affect how everybody talks to each other and the dog. And I have never had anybody in over 30 years of training pick the second version.
Yeah.
But if you don't know how to get the behavior,
Mhm.
and I'm a mom, I have 2 wonderful kids, they will both tell you I've yelled at them. More than once.
Yeah.
Sometimes more than once in the same minute. That's where we go when we get frustrated, right?
Mhm.
So we have to think about what we're saying, how we feel about it, and the tone we use. But if we are careful about what we're saying, if I call my kids rotten, not so,
Mhm.
the way I feel about them and think about them is going to be really different, and the way I talk to them is going to be really different. And our relationship, when they grow up, is not going to be what I want it to be. And the same goes for my dog.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm
Yes.
seeking joy every day.
Yeah, it's super powerful. It really is. I think they're often it's something that it's easy to gloss over if you're not conscious about it,
Yeah.
because people maybe don't understand the importance of it. But when you look at it like that, I mean, I felt that.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to live their life like that. Nobody wants to be yelling at the dog. Dog doesn't want to be yelled at. My husband doesn't want to be yelled at. I don't want to yell at him. And those moments can happen when we've reached our limit, because we are all human, but making that conscious choice to do it differently and to move on from now. I really do think that when we know better, we do better. So it's just a matter of putting it into practice and, keeping that on our minds as we are building this relationship with our dogs.
Yeah.
It teaches you so much about yourself. To be able to handle a situation with being cool, calm, and collected can be hard.
Mhm.
It can be something that you have to work towards. But really thinking about that about yourself before bringing home a puppy, is this is not. I always tell people this is not just like a puppy class thing and you're done. This is
Mhm.
you brought a beating heart into your life, and if this is, really, you have to really think about yourself in that moment. I know that this weekend, my dog had a seizure, and my partner and I learned so much about ourselves. It was 4 a.m. She was thrashing. We got up, and it was just like, okay, you watch your head. I'll stay back. I mean, it was like instant teammate mode. And we both looked at each other and were like, wow, that was really powerful to have that moment with her where no one was like, oh my God,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then helping her come out of it and and she with her disorientation, it's it's also a human to human communication as well, is that everyone in the home I love to see is on the same board with the
Mhm.
training and with how we're talking to our dogs. Sometimes I walk into lessons and like maybe a husband might be skeptical or and so it's just making sure as a trainer that I'm here to say, this is a full family on board, and I
Mhm.
would like everyone to kind of be talking the same way, not just, well, mom talks to the dog that way, or this is my sister's dog, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that consistency is so important. It impacts the dog's ability to be successful, and it impacts each human's ability to build a relationship with that dog. I get that a lot within families where maybe 50% of the household is on board and
Mhm.
50% doesn't want to deal with it, or just wants the behaviors to happen for them after somebody else puts the work in. And it doesn't work like that. Every relationship needs to be cultivated, and that process can look different,
Yeah.
for each person in the household, but there needs to be consistent communication, and it needs to be kind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about upcoming Puppy Summit, because you guys have some really fantastic presentations planned. Becca, I know that we talked quite a bit about communication today, and you're going to be talking about communication. So for those of our viewers that might have puppies or even adolescents that are still early on in their learning process, I think this chat's going to be fantastic. So can you talk to our listeners kind of about what they might expect from tuning into your presentation?
We're going to talk a lot about communication, and you're going to meet my kids, you're going to meet my dogs. I involved most of the family and I think all of the dogs actually. And I did that because I have a unique pair of dogs right now. And so I really want to help people kind of get to know who their dogs are.
Mhm.
And so we're going to spend a little bit of time. It's not so much of ABC on how to train a dog. It's about getting to know your dog and recognizing who they are a little bit and learning how to communicate with them and appreciating who they are. Because if we can understand who they are, it can tell us a little bit more about how to communicate with them. Because communication can be very individual.
Mhm.
And so we're going to learn a little bit about that. There's several different facets to the talk because there's just a lot that I wanted to cover. And there's going to be some bonus material because it turns out I can't keep anything down to, 75 minutes. I tried. Y'all, I tried. And I decided we could do bonus material. An executive decision. There's going to be bonus material.
I love
Since
it.
it's recorded, I can
Love
do that.
that.
But it's, there's going to be some opportunities to observe different personalities in dogs because I've got some very different puppies in the house right now, so that you can learn a little bit about them, and we're going to learn a little bit about training just so that you can learn some really basic stuff about the way you communicate. And
Mhm.
I'll be really honest, some of this was uncomfortable to do. It really was. Some of the videos, one of the videos with my daughter in particular, and I went back and watched it. It was hard. And I almost didn't include it because for me emotionally, it was hard. And I put a video after it to kind of soften it for you guys. But I felt it was really important. And I really think that it's going to help people improve the relationship with their dog. And we have so many amazing people on our team. Erin's how-to on the step-by-step on how to do some training, and her work with the deaf and the blind dogs is amazing. The stuff that you're doing, we've got so much of that. And I really wanted to talk to the heart of our communication. And that's largely where I've gone, because the communication's important, but the heart of the communication is kind of where my passion lies. And so that's where I've gone.
I love that you got vulnerable. I mean, let's be honest, this industry that we're in is emotionally charged for us. It's hard not to be. We are, the whole admin team is extremely passionate about what we do. And I love that you included your kids in that, because I think that for a lot of people, that family dynamic, we feel that our dogs are our family, and we feel that kids are family. And sometimes that connection between everybody can be really challenging. And it can almost be like that there's tension there, it's that, so I love that you included that, and I'm really looking forward to watching that.
Thank you.
It's very powerful.
Yeah.
Very, very powerful.
It is. Now, Erin, you've got 2 chats, one on enrichment and one for our puppies with impairments. Talk to us about what we can expect from those chats.
Yeah, so I am very excited about both of them. The Getting a Sense Puppyhood is going to be a teaser of my 3-part course of Getting a Sense. So I offer a course called Getting a Sense, and it's broken down into puppyhood, teenagehood, and adulthood. So
Awesome.
this is a teaser of puppyhood on basically, it's going to give you a, my dog is itching herself and it's shaking the computer. So I'm gonna hold it up for a second. So it's going to go over some of those top 5 things of what we really want to consider when we bring home a deaf and blind puppy. We're going to be talking about safety. The first cues to think about. Startling is I am extremely passionate about startling and trying to prevent startling, trying to help decompression after startling, ways to practice with not having your dog startle. So it's just basically an intro to anyone who may be feeling in over their head of, I'm so excited I brought this new disabled puppy home, but I'm not quite sure where to get started. So that's going to be kind of that teaser of that 3-part course. And then my
I want to
oh
pause
yeah.
you for just
Yeah.
a minute, because let me just say that even if we don't have a puppy that has impairments, that startle that you're talking about and that decompression after startle is still super important. I have lots of clients that come to me and they're like, I can't move my puppy when he's sleeping. He gets really upset when that happens. And I totally get it. If I was
Yeah.
sleeping and my husband came over and did something that I perceived as rude, I would also not be happy about it. But so I think that that's really important, and a lot of people will get value from that, even if they don't have a puppy that has impairments. So I'm looking forward
I
to that.
appreciate you saying that. It's funny because every time I talk about, oh, puppies with impairments, everyone's like, I can apply that to my puppy without
Yep.
impairment. So that's great. And so the second presentation is called Let's Get Enriched, and it's basically just enrichment seems to be quite the word. We've all been in the industry for a while now, and I would say enrichment in the last 2-3 years has really
Mhm.
been like the buzzword. And I just want to really talk about what that means. And it doesn't have to mean snuffle mat all the time. It doesn't
Right.
have to mean, it can mean so many different things. And this seminar or this talk is really meant for those really infant little guys. I mean, it's really meant for anybody, any age, but those infants of getting really creative. I've got a couple videos of, I set up my garage as like a little jungle gym, and I would scatter treats. And when they were younger, when my puppies were younger, when the thunderstorm was happening, and they weren't really phased by it at first. It was like, okay, well, let's get you to walk through this, and let's have you do this with some some thunder lightning sounds in the back. So it's a way to think about treat bombing in the grass. It's a way to
Mhm.
just with this buzzword, it doesn't have to mean a stuffed Kong every single time. And it's just
Right.
kind of an opener of what that can be. Of course, a lot of the videos will include deaf and blind dogs, but this is really meant for everyone. For deaf and blind dogs, it's meant to build confidence. And
Mhm.
obviously, it's for every puppy, but to have the confidence to stick your head into something that you have no idea that you can't see you're sticking your head into, or to put your head under something, or to walk over something. So meant for all puppies, but really also to. I noticed a huge difference when out adventuring with my deaf and blind dog, that because I spent that first month of doing that jungle gym kind of thing, there was much more confidence when out and about in the elements of having to go over things and under things.
Absolutely. That enrichment, I think it's, again, we think of enrichment as stuffed Kongs. And don't get me wrong, I do a ton of stuffed Kongs, but
Yeah, yeah.
we aren't limited to
No.
food. We aren't limited to just a specific kind of puzzle. But when we're thinking about enrichment, sometimes it can be hard. I mean, let's be honest, we're all busy. It can be
Yeah.
hard to get creative and think outside of the box. We think of X, Y, and Z that we do all the time. And yes, that is enrichment, but we can also expand beyond that,
Right.
to
Yeah.
use all of those senses, and to even use enrichment for puppies as a learning platform. We can actually use enrichment to boost confidence, to teach important life skills that will benefit the puppy as they grow up into that adventure dog that we want. So that'll
And
be that'll be good.
I'm hoping that the people that decide to watch the talk, I'm hoping that there's some that have older dogs too, because I am going to
Yeah.
talk a little bit about, we always talk about enrichment with puppies, but for our senior dogs, it
Yeah.
is
That's what I was
so
just thinking.
beneficial to give them something. I have a 7-year-old dog and I have a 1-year-old dog, and they get the same kind of enrichment. And
Yep.
whereas they may not get the same activities
Mhm.
physically, they're definitely going to get the same enrichment. And I love seeing my 7-year-old I mean, we all think like, oh, the older dogs are so good, we don't have to do anything with them, they're just so chill. But I love seeing her perk up for her, special whatever of that day. And I think that's sometimes more joyful to watch than a puppy exploring, just to bring that extra bit of excitement to them. And I also want to show how to stuff certain things, because you can get really creative with it, and that you don't have to go broke on these things. You
Yeah.
can DIY a lot of these things, especially if you're creative, and it can be fun.
I love
Awesome.
that you're also working on teaching how to use it. I think sometimes there can be a disconnect where people think enrichment is just making things hard,
Yeah,
and that's
totally.
not true. And we can create some frustration and even turn a dog away from using food and in enrichment if
Mhm.
it's always hard and they are not successful with it. So I
Yeah,
love that
find
you're diving into
appropriate enrichment toy for
uh-huh.
that dog.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I love that. So, if you guys are listening, I mean, in all honesty, a lot of these presentations are good regardless of the age of your dog. If you've
Yeah,
got a puppy, if
definitely.
you've got a teenager, if maybe you have an older dog in the home but are planning on adding a puppy, Puppy Summit's going to be a really good opportunity for you guys. We've got 13 professional trainers, 18 presentations. It is all happening live November 12th through the 14th. So if you attend live, you can get those questions answered. We're going to have Q&As. So you'll get some, virtual FaceTime with trainers and be able to do that. But if you don't attend live, trust us as dog trainers. We attend conferences all the time, and it's exhausting. It's a lot. you reach a certain amount of presentations, and you're like, my brain can't do anything more. So no more learning can happen today. So we get that, which is why you'll have access to it. So you'll be able to continue to access this content for a year, to get caught up, to rewatch and take notes. So there's really a lot of opportunity for improving your own knowledge to help your puppy, grow into that adult dog that you want them to be. So there is a link in the description to Puppy Summit, so you guys can head over and get tickets. And tickets are less than a single private lesson, so it is
Yeah.
absolutely worth 18 hours of learning for basically less than a single class. So I hope that you guys head over and take a look. And if you know somebody that might benefit from improving communication, improving enrichment, please tag them in the comments so that we can spread the word about our upcoming Puppy Summit.
I
Becca,
just want
Erin, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I'm still doing my ticket giveaway. So I
Oh,
have
excellent.
a ticket available for my giveaway this week. And if anyone is interested in Puppy Summit, but maybe might not have those funds right now, I am offering, if you head to my social media, tell me a little bit about your story, share my post, then you'll be entered into the giveaway.
Excellent. So yeah, we already gave our tickets. We drew 2 days ago. So I'll be sure to update this post with a direct link to Down to Earth Doglady, so you guys can head over to her page. And who knows, maybe you will be a lucky winner of a free pass to Puppy Summit. That's pretty awesome. All right, Becca, Erin, thank you so much for joining me today. Always a pleasure. And
Yeah.
I am looking forward to your presentations, as I know that a lot are.
Thank you so
Thank you
much
so
for having
much.
me.